Okay, so I'm Carlos Castrucci, and I'm a first-year MBA student at Columbia. The next panel opens a series of discussions dedicated to examine the strategies for strengthening the resilience of Brazil's supply chains and the emerging market opportunities. For this panel, we turn to one of Brazil's most defining sectors, agriculture. Few countries in the world carry the same responsibility as Brazil to prove that productivity and sustainability can advance together at scale. New findings from Virginia Tech provide compelling information on this topic. They show that Brazil's growth is not coming from expanding farmland, which averaged less than 0.2% per year since 2011. The real engine has been total factor productivity, a measure of innovation. This sets the stage perfectly for our discussion. Future investments in technology and regenerative practices are needed to sustain high output growth levels. This session will explore how Brazil has the potential not only to feed the world, but also to fuel it sustainably. I'm delighted to introduce our panelists, Gabriel Moreira Pinto, Energy and Carbon Executive Director of Atvos, Fabiana Alves, South America General Manager of Rabobank, Arthur Liacre, Vice President of Strategy and Development of Mosaic, Eduardo Bastos, CEO of Instituto Equilíbrio, and leading this discussion, our moderator, Sylvia Coutinho, former CEO of Bank UBS for Brazil and Latin America, board member of COSAN and Edenred, and senior advisor of Ambipar. Please come join me.
Thank you, Carlos. It's a great pleasure to be here talking about agribusiness, which is close to my heart, and also being at Columbia, since I'm an alumni of Columbia, so it's my alma mater as well. So love, carinho, and congratulations to everybody who has been. I had the luck to be in the 4 sessions. This is the 4th. Thomas, you're amazing. Luciana and everybody organizing, so thank you very much for inviting me. So, I want to thank, of course, all the participants, and we have lots of content to discuss. So I will excuse myself from introducing each of the panelists, knowing that their full bio is in the program. And I wanted just to make a couple of remarks before we start. When we talk about emissions in Brazil, we know that the majority comes from what we call land use, different from many industrialized countries. This also includes, of course, deforestation. And I think it is important to note that in Brazil, over 90% of deforestation is linked to illegal or criminal activity. So when we talk about legal land use, I see Brazilian agriculture more as part of the solution than part of the problem, and I hope this panel will help clarify that. We all know, and Carlos talked about that the agenda of food security is becoming more and more prominent globally, and Brazil is today the largest exporter of food. And more importantly, Brazil could double its production without having to cut one single tree. It's estimated today that Brazil is feeding over 1 billion people around the world, besides its own population. And the agribusiness as a whole not only is important, I think, strategically for the world because of food security, but also for Brazil. Brazil, when you look at the whole agribusiness sector in Brazil, the entire value chain, it represents over 30% of GDP. So it has become a very important part of Brazilian economy. Also, thanks to the agribusiness sector, Brazil is one of the largest producers of biofuels and also green energy. So we thought it would be important to have in this summit a double click on the agribusiness sector And again, the idea is for us here to discuss through our panel how the agribusiness can become more and more part of the solution and less part of the problem. So with that said, I'm going to turn to my good friend, and also both of us are agriculture engineers from Exalc, so we are, right? Even though I graduated before you, so, right? Edu Bastos. So Edu, it would be great if you could give us an overview of the current state, how do you see the current state of the art of the agribusiness sector in Brazil? But it would be interesting for you to give us kind of a quick historical overview of how we got to where we are today. So it was mentioned, it's about productivity, it's about embedding a lot of research, a lot of technology, so it would be great to have your views. And in the mix, as you explain this evolution, how do you see the sustainability aspects of it? Edu.
Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. It's a real pleasure to be here. Tom, so good to see you, my friend. And good to see a lot of familiar faces. And my job here, though, is try to explain in probably 7 minutes a little bit about the Brazil. Brazil, it's a food and nature powerhouse. We are the 4th largest producer in the world, China, India, US, Brazil, but we are the #1 in exports. So we are feeding more people than any other country in the world, as you mentioned, at least 1 billion people every day. It's fully dependent of Brazil production. We are much more a powerhouse in proteins, some carbs, I can say, like sugar. We are the #1 in sugar. We are the #1 in coffee. 1 in every 3 cups of coffee all over the world come from Brazil. Soybean, we surpassed US 10 years ago. We are still today, we are the #1 in soybean. Corn, we are not the biggest producer, but we are the biggest exporter. Cotton, we are the biggest, the 2nd largest producer, but the biggest exporter. Beef, we are the 2nd largest producer, but the biggest exporter. So in a lot of value chains, we learn, mostly in the last 50 years, due to the conquer, we can say, of Cerrado. We made this joke for the Brazilian ones. No, I think the first letter from Pedro Vaz de Caminha to Portugal said, oh, here, if you plant, everything will grow. And we made this joke, say, this is probably one of the first fake news dated, because Brazil, we do have the poorest and the worst soils in the world, due to UN. It's not me saying that. And we became a powerhouse, even with that kind of challenge. And mostly because we bring good science, we bring good producers, and a whole value chain that helped to convert this land, mostly in the Cerrado, the center of Brazil. Is like a savanna, for those that don't know. I strongly recommend for you, all of you, to visit. But what is interesting, it's because we did that in the last 50 years, we create a lot of challenges for ourselves. No, when you think about deforestation and you say, oh, okay, you have legal and illegal. Okay, folks, deforestation is a bad word. So it's hard to explain something bad in a good name. Say, no, but it's legal. I will try to explain for those that are not Brazilian. When you talk about hunting, if you are all over the world, except in Brazil, most of the countries in the world, hunting, it's a good thing to do. But if you do that without permits, it's illegal hunting. But you don't call illegal hunting because hunting is a good thing. So you call poaching. Poaching is a word, no, to do illegal things with hunting. In Brazil, it's exactly the same thing. Hunting and poaching is caçar. There's just one word, caçar, which is bad by definition. It's the same challenge that we're facing with deforestation, because they say, okay, farmers, some farmers, they have the legal rights to convert the land, but when they do that, oh, it's deforestation, which means it's bad. So this is one of the challenges that we have. But again, when you talk about the not just put just in common, but just a powerhouse for food, but it's also a powerhouse for nature. We have the 3rd largest forest in the world. forests only in Russia are bigger than any other country in the world. So it's, no, we don't have the biggest forest in the world. But we have the third largest, no, Russia, Canada, us. But it's the most diverse. Almost 1/4 or 1/5 of the global biodiversity are there. And besides all the good things that we've been done in food, we still kept 65% of the country intact. So we convert 35% in crops. Most of the countries in the global north converted something around 70 to 80%. And again, folks, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. No, we must produce food in order to keep ourselves alive. But what we learn in Brazil, because we enter late in the game, say, okay, you will have to produce, but you have to produce more in less land because they don't have the permits to convert more. And we learned to do that. In the last mostly 50 years, we learned to do 2 crops, in some cases 3 crops, in some cases like some places like ICLF, integration crop livestock forces that we call in Brazil ILPF. We are producing 4 crops in 1 year. So it changed everything. And finally, when you think about the future, the world is consuming something around 2.1 billion tons of grains today. We will consume 3 billion tons in 2050. FAO is saying that, OECD, a lot of players. So we need 900 million more. Remember, Brazil is the 4th largest producer. We have a super crop this year, 350 million tons. The world will need 900 million. Which means that they put a lot of pressure to say, folks, please, keep doing your job, increasing your productivity, and we do have a solution for that, recovering degraded lands. That's our main goal for the future, and I hope to have some time to explain that later. Thank you.
Thanks, Edu. And I think it's worth mentioning as well, of the 60+% of the land that is still preserved, half of that is in private properties of farmers. And in Brazil, you have something called the Forest Code, which no other country has. For instance, I have a farm in São Paulo, which is the most expensive land in Brazil. I have to keep 20% of my farm untouched. In the Amazon is 80%. I mean, and you go from 80 to a graduation, from 20%, which is the least, to 80%, depending on the biome. So we just have seen in Europe, everybody screaming and kicking because they wanted to increase, I think, to something like 4%, right? The percentage of preserved land. I think it's important to mention that as well. Good, so Gabriel, thanks for being here with us. Brazil is the 2nd largest producer of biofuels after the US, mainly, of course, sugarcane-based ethanol. In the case of Brazil, in the US, it's basically corn-based. And we have often heard discussions about biofuels compete with food, talking about food, right? So, of course, this will more and more become eventually an issue. And I even heard once, which was quite interesting, somebody tell me that they didn't like the Brazilian ethanol because it was causing deforestation in the Amazon. I heard that from a very senior official once. And let me tell you that the ethanol in Brazil is produced in the state of São Paulo, where I have my farm. I don't produce ethanol, but you know, it's a small farm. But it is at least 3.5 hours by plane to the Amazon. So definitely, I think it's important to make that straight. So, Gabriel, it would be great to hear your views on how the Brazilian model is unique in clean and renewable energy. And if we could zoom on ethanol and how important it is today for the Brazilian energy matrix.
Thank you, Sylvia. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. So our vision about this topic is that food and fuel are very complementary. They can grow together, and we don't see this a trade-off in the Brazilian case. I'd like to structure this in 3 main reasons. The first is that land availability is not a bottleneck for Brazil in the foreseeable future that we can imagine. Just to give an order of magnitude, today only 1% of the land in Brazil produces sugarcane. Less than 10% of the land in Brazil produces agriculture products. So, and most of the expansion of at least of sugarcane in the case, and most of agriculture is being in pasture land, as you mentioned, not in the Amazon region, but most in the center south. Therefore, there are many technical studies about this that show that we could grow 5 to 6 times the production of biofuels in Brazil without needing any preserved land, and also in economic terms, in good economic terms, right? Already with these 2 restrictions. So, and also, a large part of this land that we grow is already degraded land. So when we grow more biofuels, we're actually making good for the environment because we're preserving, restoring this degraded land. Therefore, this is the first reason, so we could grow a lot without deforestation. The second point is based on productivity, as you guys mentioned before. Sugarcane, differently from other crops, especially grains, has not grown so much productivity in the last decades. So there is still a lot of room for that. Most studies estimate 30 to 40% that we could grow in this regard, only thinking about sugarcane, but also most of the expansion of ethanol, recent expansion of ethanol in Brazil is based on corn. And corn in Brazil is being grown for ethanol as a second harvest, right? A second crop in the year, as was mentioned. And this is amazing because in terms of productivity and resources, you're using the same land and most of the same inputs for producing much more corn in a soybean production, right? Only today, less than 40% of soybean production in Brazil already explores this second harvest corn. So there's a lot of growth in this regard without needing any additional producing much more ethanol in Brazil. And the third point is based on the governance and economic incentives in Brazil for biofuels. We have a program in Brazil called RenovaBio, which is inspired by US LCFS, low carbon fuel standards, which give us, it's like similar to a carbon cap and trade market, but it's inspired in that idea. And it gives a relevant revenue for ethanol, for biofuel producers in Brazil based on emission reduction, right? So, for example, in the case of sugarcane, depending on the player, it can get up to 10% of cash generation based on this carbon credit-like tool. And for this program, there's a very strict zero deforestation requirement. So land that has recent reforestation cannot be eligible, so you lose all these credits. So this is a very important topic for producers. And for example, at Atvos, our expansion team, our land team has in the economic model the criteria. We don't buy this land because we know that we won't be getting carbon credits, right? So, and all the players in the sector are seeing like this. So, and besides that, Brazil is growing as an export, right? There's this important avenue of growth exporting ethanol for other countries. And the international criteria, the certifications such as ISCC and Bonsucro, they don't allow as well deforestation. So this government making important incentives to avoid deforestation in biofuels in Brazil. So for these 3 reasons, we don't see it as a trade-off, but also very important synergies and avenue for growth.
And Gabriel, I would add also second-generation ethanol, which is now beginning to, and I know Paul is around here. I'm in Cosan. Cosan is one of the, the companies that have launched to try to scale. So you use it from biomass. So it's definitely not competing with food. Thanks, Gabriel. Arthur, thank you. So we know that for Brazil to, of course, have these increased levels of productivity and production, and Edu mentioned our soils are not fertile at all, so it requires a lot of inputs. And today this ends up being one of Brazilians' agriculture Achilles heel, because we depend a lot on imported fertilizers. I think, if I'm not mistaken, around 80% or something like that. So my question to you is, what is the importance, of course, first, what is the importance of Brazil as a market for Mosaic? But how is Mosaic integrating sustainability in its core business, while, of course, at the same time maintaining its competitive competitiveness globally?
Okay, thank you, Sylvia, for the good question. Lots to unpack. I hope I'll be able to bring some useful thoughts here to the discussion. Thank you to the organization for having Mosaic on the panel. Also a pleasure to be back on campus as a Columbia alumni. It's been some time, but that's good. Maybe before jumping to the key concepts of your questions, in 30 seconds, give some information about Mosaic. We are an American company traded on the New York Stock Exchange. We are the largest combined producer of phosphates and potash fertilizer products. We have a couple of specificities. We connect two sectors, mining and agriculture, and we have a very big American continent geographic anchor. We mine potash in Canada, phosphates in Central Florida, and we have a sizable business in Brazil, in fact, which I will describe now. I think Mosaic recognized about 20 years ago that to be a relevant player in agriculture, having a footprint in Brazil was first and foremost, and so we've been partnering with tropical agriculture. In Brazil, we operate 6 mines. We are present in about 12 states. We've had a journey of organic and inorganic growth up to the point that now the business represents anywhere between 30 to 40% of our global revenue. Moving to your question, Sylvia, I think there are 3 points I would make on this. At the risk of, very high risk of stating the very obvious, when you have at your core of your business model mining and agriculture in 3 of the most nature-endowed countries, Canada, US, and Brazil, partners with our host communities that we have, sound environmental stewardship programs, and this is what we do in different fields through the Mosaic Institute, in education, food, water stewardship, local development, you name it. We've also done, a lot to green our energy procurement in Brazil. We have a sizable partnership with Casa dos Ventos. Casa dos Ventos today is a wind power company that procures about 50% of our energy needs as a business. But if I move down the value chain of what we do, maybe starting about mining, sustainability-related practices and programs are completely embedded in what we do in every step of what we do. There is no way you can operate a business wherever on the planet, but in particular in Brazil, where I take note that standards are generally go above and beyond international standards, and so it's important to reinforce that. And we really strive to make sure our partners in the public sector understand that we put this as the very core of what we do. This is how you get your license to operate, your social license to operate, and you get business continuity. And if I move from the mine to the field, which is the discussion, the topic at hand today, I think our stance is really to promote and represent responsible productivity. This is how we kind of encapsulate what we do. First, because the centrality of Brazil in our strategy is such that we get our nutrients in the Brazil soil in time and at scale, working with our customers on a day-to-day basis, so that we are a reliable and predictable source of fertilizers. We do have our business objectives like any company, but we also think of ourselves as part of the essential food industry, so really getting our system as efficient as possible to get the nutrients in the Brazil soil is really something that we have at the core of our mission. We do a lot of advice to our customers. Our 200 plus agronomists spread across the country work with the customers to advise them on effective application of fertilizers. There's a program that we follow called the 4R nutrient stewardship. It's the right source, the right rate, the right location, the right time. We have, I don't mean to catalog a lot of initiatives, but these would be the more meaningful, I guess. A good partnership with Embrapa, where we train technicians in livestock production to the correct use of fertilizers for pastures. And then we empower communities. We work with small-scale farmers up north in the country to advise them on sound agronomic practices, how they need to look after the water cycle to improve livelihoods, but also to be able to expand potentially their small business. So all that said, what I'm trying to demonstrate, and I hope I'm able to demonstrate it, is that, you know, strategy is a key cross-cutting business process that actually empowers our strategy and is completely synergistic with the notion of competitiveness. I mean, there's no antagonism. On the contrary, I think most of this audience knows that. They work really hand in hand. And so this is how we believe we can execute on our mission best. And to conclude, I mean, we're of course following the preparation work for the COP30 discussions, and it's very good to see that those concepts are being framed a bit that way to position the Brazil Ag as a thought partner rather than a passive stakeholder. So I think, you know, for Mosaic, it's very pleasant to see that, you know, the movement is clear in that direction. So.
Thanks, Artur. Fabi, my good friend and also partner in crime of many initiatives. So, and Fabi came a couple of days sooner than she was supposed to be here to be with us here. So thank you very much. So Fabi, we know how crucial it is financing for agriculture, for agribusiness in general, and especially for Brazil, where interest rates have been traditionally much higher than global averages, and more so these days, I must say. So if financing for traditional agriculture is already a challenge, it must be even more so a challenge to finance non-traditional, you know, low carbon, regenerative agriculture. So that must be a bigger challenge in a way, because it's, again, those are new spaces. And I know you have been quite yourself involved in that, in trying to find this right balance. Fabi, how you think that innovative financing models, I mean, how can innovative financing models be structured to incentivize climate resilient agriculture, all the practices, but at scale? The issue is we see a lot of projects going on, small projects, and I think Maria mentioned that as well. How can we scale that? And financing has to be the big push for that.
Thank you, Sylvia. An honor to be here in this very important school. First of all, I'd like to introduce a little bit Rabobank, because I don't know if everyone is familiar with this weird name bank. We are a Dutch cooperative bank, full of purpose, founded more than 120 years ago by Dutch farmers, meaning that this allows us a unique strategical positioning. We are not listed, we even don't have owners. Ultimately, our owners are the Dutch society. That said, you can imagine that this allows us to be a kind of a different bank. Nowadays, extremely focused on the transition in the food and agricultural chain. Outside of the Netherlands, we are mainly focused on food and agriculture, and transitioning, it's a key strategical driver for us. That said, I would say that the whole financial industry has a great opportunity and challenge to elevate sustainability, the sustainability agenda, to the same strategical level as the traditional risk return. Meaning now that the financial industry should look at a triangle, risk return and sustainability as a balance. And that, of course, is very challenging, because financing low-carbon agriculture, regenerative agriculture, reforestation, restoration, and all the climate-related projects bring different risks and different needs. Although we want to see these at scale, somehow these still require tailor-made financial solutions. Not only because of tenor, some of those investments, those capex require long-term facilities, financial facilities to combine with their returns, but also because the transition in farming brings, of course, more risk of volatility on the production, and therefore does require that the financial instruments can cope with that. Not to mention that the financial incentives must come from the value chain. Of course, investing on those projects compete with the traditional OPEX and CAPEX and growth opportunities that we have, especially in Brazil. So the Rabobank Group as a whole nowadays has more or less 10% of its assets related with sustainability, with sustainable linked loans or facilities, you name it. And we aim at reaching 20% by 2030. In Brazil, specifically, in the last years, we have led more than $10 billion transactions related with sustainability, being bonds, supporting issuing bonds, green loans, sustainability-linked transactions. 10 years ago, we structured together with the UN, FMO, and also IDB, the Agri-3 Fund. It's a blended impacted fund focused on bringing the transition to reality and financing projects, regenerative projects, and avoid deforestation projects, and all related with agriculture regenerative. The results nowadays is that we have supported projects related with almost 100,000 hectares in agriculture, regenerative agriculture, and 140,000 hectares in forest protection. Agri-T is a global fund, but of course, Brazil has been the main client because of our efforts on really pushing the sustainable financial on our portfolio in Brazil. Another example, it's the Responsible Commodities Facility. It's a facility for crop financing that offers special conditions to farmers, backed up by the de-risking offered by European retailers. So European retailers are willing to de-risk the transaction, considering that those credits are going to be linked with preserving nature beyond our forest code, with requiring excess of natural vegetation on the farms beyond the forest code, meaning that farmers that will be entitled to this facility with a financial incentive must keep excess of nature on their farms. And that it's one very important example to be scalable, because it comes with the commitment of the whole value chain. Quite often, it's expected that farmers and financial services solve the problem by themselves, but it's necessary actually to engage beyond that. And last but not least, nowadays we are putting lots of efforts to actually understand in depth with our clients what is their sustainable growth plan, to make sure that we can scale up all the transactions that are sustainably, that are linked with the climate and sustainability agenda. And when we say sustainable growth plan, we are not only focused on sustainability as like initiatives to produce more sustainably, but sustainability has to come with a broader understanding. They must be sustainable, environmental, socially, and economically. I also come from a school in US that is pretty much focused on positive impact, and there I've learned that green is not sustainable if it's not minimally profitable. So we need to make sure that the economics fit as well, to allow for scalable solutions and solutions that are attractive for those farmers. Because indeed, implementing low-carbon agriculture, as you mentioned, regenerative agriculture, restoring degraded land, preserving more land than they are required to preserve by our law, all of that brings additional risks.
And costs.
And costs, of course, for an activity that is already a way too risky. So,
great, thank you. So we have round 2 and round 3. I'll ask you guys to kind of try to so that we can go to the third round. So Edu, I know you've been kind of bringing the different stakeholders to the game. So how do you think that, multi-stakeholder partnerships between the private sector, government, and academia can accelerate, you think, the scaling of some of those sustainable agricultural solutions that I know you're involved? And I think one point that it's interesting is the metrics, right? In Brazil, as we know, today we use current metrics that are from temperate agriculture, from the developed countries, let's put it this way, not from the south. And in tropical agriculture, and specifically in Brazil, because of the practices we have, like direct planting and others, we store much more carbon in the soil than the parameters that are currently used. So that's part of it. How are you seeing? I know Embrapa is trying to push that agenda together with the Zauki, our alma mater, of course. But how do you see that and the importance of that? Because, as you said, it has to be economically viable. And for that to be economically viable, the economic equation has to close. And for that to close, you have to have the proper evaluation of how much you're bringing to the table in terms of carbon footprint, as an example, which currently is not correct, right?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the question. Actually, we always said that, no, if you are in the lunch, you have to choose if you are sit on the table or if you will be the menu. In Brazil, most of the times we were the menu and say, guys, no, I want to sit on the table. But in order to do that, we have to publish more. Publish in tier 1 magazines, publish in English, of course. And it's really sad to say that, but that's the reality. If you want to have these approved from UN, the IPCC, all those players, we have to get the approvals from the global north, which is really sad, but that's the reality. So I say, okay, guys, let's not fight against that. Let's work together. So we built a center, a carbon center in Piracicaba at our alma mater, Zauki. I am the chairman of the center, actually. But that's what we decided to do, to say, okay, globally, you have to dig at 30 centimeters of soil, no, to understand the carbon content. Why 30? Because most of the soils in the global north, the carbon content, there are content in those 30. Because all the other from down, it's too cold to have life. So life resides in the 30 centimeters. Okay, we don't have snow in Brazil. Good. So the carbon content, we have in the first 30 centimeters, something around 50%. But because I have to dig only 30 centimeters, I lose the other 50. We start doing the MRVs wrong. When we start the game as Brazilians, we lose 50%. And not because the global north is evil, but because we were not capable to deliver basic science showing we do have carbon content in the first 100 centimeters, which is a meter. And that's the beauty here. We do not build that only with the public sector. We rose 40 million reais from USP, the largest university in Brazil. But when we started that, a lot of companies said, oh, we want to do that. We want to help you. So nowadays, we have the largest group of scientists in the Global South, 80 PhDs working every day. I hope till the end of the year we will be the largest in the world, but I still have a lot of job to do. But we rose almost 200 million from the private sector. And again, it's possible to bring all the partners together, because in the end of the day, what do you want to show? Okay, what we've done in the last 40 years is really good, because in the 70s, we import food. We are one of the fifth largest country, the fifth largest also in population. We imported food. Come on, it's not right. So now we export, it's really good, but we need to increase the productivity in those kind of soils. So how can we use better the potential that we have? We must include biological aspects in the game, not just the physical, chemical, which is really important. And I'm an agronomist, I will never say no to the fertilizers. Don't get me wrong. But if we don't have life in the soils, which means organic matter, which means carbon, but carbon is just a cherry in the cake. It's not the cake. The cake is productivity, the cake is organic matter. Because when you have organic matter, we have more capacity to store water and all those things. So we will not move without financing, we will not move without partners, and that's the beauty of that. We are doing that, we are moving, but we need more partners. Please join us, we are more than open to do that. Thank you.
Brazil is the largest user of bio-inputs, right, in the world, and expanding at 30% a year, which is amazing. Gabriel, can you give us some concrete cases where you think innovation in biofuels are delivering clear climate and productivity benefits?
Thank you, Sylvia. Yes, I believe that what's the most exciting and most fantastic thing, in my opinion, in this biofuels space in Brazil is the circularity of sugarcane ecosystem. We, Atvos, are the second largest producer of ethanol in Brazil. And from the ethanol production, we use the juice of the sugarcane, but then we have the leftovers, right? So the bagasse, the fiber, we use it for producing electricity that feeds in our own production system, and we produce ethanol from this electricity, and we also export this to the system. So today we have 830 megawatts of, it's a lot, it's almost 0.5% of Brazilian whole power system installed capacity. And besides that, which is already more traditional, what's going on? Different usages for different sub-products, even for the own bagasse. So for the bagasse, we are exploring producing corn ethanol, right, co-located with our sugarcane ethanol plants, so we can use this heat and power to further increase productivity, which is very efficient. And also, besides that, we are also looking into biochar, which is a technology that via pyrolysis, we can produce this product that we throw in the soil, and we can both have two benefits. One is to store carbon for hundreds of years, and also increase soil productivity and fertility, right? So this we already have signed a MOU to develop a pilot project of biochar in our plants. And looking ahead, what else is going on? Besides the bagasse, which is more traditional that I just mentioned, we have other co-products in sugarcane, which is vinasse and filter cake. And this historically was an environmental challenge to deal with that. But in most recent years, we transformed it in fertilizers. So we use the vinasse and the filter cake both in the soil to improve our productivity in our production. And now, more recently, we are producing biogas out of these items. And from biogas, we purify it and make it biomethane. And this biomethane is very identical to a natural gas. So we can both use it to transform our diesel freight, our diesel trucks and equipments into biomethane equipments, so reducing the carbon footprint of our production, besides exporting natural gas. So these are just some examples. There are more avenues here that we could mention. As you mentioned, second generation ethanol from bagasse, and also green ammonia, green fertilizer that we can produce via green hydrogen. So this is the most amazing thing.
We're running out. I'm terrible at managing time, as you can see. I'm going to try to steal a couple of minutes, can I? So that we just close. If in 1 minute, each one of you here, Artur, you are investing in bio inputs. Since we talked about bio inputs, biofertilizers. Just in 1 minute, how important that is. And Fabi, we talked about insurance in Brazil, right? One of the Achilles heels, as we mentioned, the Brazilian crops are not insured. We have less than 50% insured in Brazil. It's the other way around in the US. 85 is insured, 15 is not. Brazil, 85 is not insured, and this was part of the parametric and how to decrease and to de-risk agriculture. So those would be the two questions. If you can, I know it's challenging in 1 minute, but 1 minute and 1 minute.
That's question 3, actually, right? That you're asking. Yeah, but I'll try to reorganize. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Yes, I thought that was more important than question 2.
Good, perfect. Just a general consideration, we understand full well at Mosaic the size of the challenge that is being asked to Brazil agriculture. It's about producing more food in a more productive way, in a more climate resilient way, and less carbon intensive. That's a lot to ask to a sector, right? The good news is I think Brazil has never waited for the provocation to already implement cutting edge, agriculture, sustainable practices, and so we've got, prominent agronomists with international recognition and awards that have been actually granted earlier this year on biological nitrogen fixation. I read an article the other day that said, very eloquently that the Brazil agriculture is becoming more biointelligent, and so we really believe in that, and so that leads me to say 2 things. We continue investing in innovation on our mineral fertilizers, on our advanced crop nutrition program, so that our products become more efficient. The nutrient use efficiency is really increasing at the farm level. We develop in labs, test in farms, of course. And the big news is that since last year, we've launched our Mosaic Bioscience division, to your point, Sylvia, in bionutrition, not biocontrol. We do think that the good biologicals are synergistic for better efficiency when combined to mineral fertilizers. We've got a sizable pipeline of products that is being prepared. Some of them will reach Brazil very, very soon, and ambitious development plans in terms of revenue generation. So,
thanks, Artur.
Well, lack of insurance definitely impacts the scalability. For obvious reasons, I don't think I need to explain further than that. But in order to unlock the insurance market in Brazil, we need data analytics, we need science, we need geodata, and this is probably the one of the greatest opportunities that we have in terms of the financial industry. As we mentioned before, implementing the transition agenda, the sustainability practices, you name it, brings more risk and more costs, and perhaps more volatility on productivity. To aim at scaling up the solutions, we need to unlock the insurance market.
Definitely, and as we bring more science to the game with all the metrics and the parameters, that will hopefully help. Listen, thank you very much for the panel. I hope we were able to explain a little bit more some of the interesting characteristics. I truly believe I have been around, and I'm a agriculture engineer, as I mentioned, around in different countries. I think Brazil has Brazil is probably the most sustainable agriculture on earth these days. I know well how it's done in the US. We were discussing with Edu that at scale, right? Talking about agriculture at scale. And I think what I see is people very concerned. Producers in Brazil, no other sector is as exposed to climate as agriculture, definitely. Everybody's quite concerned, and I think there is I see a lot of producers, they keep forests, they keep on in excess. I'm one of them, I have 50% of my land with forests, but because they understand today the value of environmental services, the value of nature, for water, and all of that. So I think more and more, you know, agriculture is at the intersection of health, human health, ecological health, and I think this is something that I hear a lot in Brazil and the concerns about that. So thank you very much. Thank you for your participation. I'm sorry we